We're going to begin with a video.
More than 100 immigration and custom enforcement agents raided a Van Nuys company today. The raid took place at a printer supply manufacturer called Micro Solutions Enterprises. Family and friends rushed over as soon as they heard what was going on.
From Newscomer 13, you can see a toddler who doesn't quite understand why she can't be with her mother.
Pero más los pequeños que muy posiblemente aún no entienden lo sucedido.
¿Por qué vienen a mí? Así no es justo. Porque hay muchos niños que son seres de acá y luego sus papás son de México y luego viene la migra y se los llevan, no es justo.
Para mí fue más triste cuando yo hablé con ella para decirle que había llegado migración. Ella me dijo, no mami, no, sí, mija, le dije, tú no te preocupes, tu papá va a llegar por ti. Y ya cuando a nosotros nos sacaron de ahí, ella estaba fuera de la fábrica cuando a mí me subieron a la vez.
We all want to grow up with our parents being there, supporting us, helping us through all our steps of being there. Like me, if they would have to take her, she might not even be here for when I graduate. And they just need to be aware with the kids, because it does change a lot of it.
The 40 people granted what's called a humanitarian release.
Pero también hay un aspecto humanitario sobre este operativo. Gente que ha sido detenida, si tiene alguna responsabilidad en casa, va a ser documentada y después la van a dejar ir.
I don't know what is worse, that when we are in the company and see all the intimidation, or being on the detention center. I think the worst thing is being in the detention center, I guess. I see some people start to get in a really panic there, because at that point we don't know what's gonna happen to us inside there. This is, well, I call my friend, because he goes everywhere with me.
Yadira, how has it affected you to have your mom wearing a bracelet like that?
Whenever we go out, we can't go anymore.
Diario tengo que hacer esto durante 2 horas. Me empiezo a cargarlos como a las 8:30 y lo desconecto a las 10, 11:30 para poder hacer mis aseos. Porque mientras que esté yo así cargando no puedo hacer nada. Tengo que ponerme un protector aquí para que no me haga llagas, cuidarme de que no me haga llagas por el diabetes. Que yo pienso que eso no es justo, que a uno le hayan puesto esto y a los que de veras son delincuentes no se los ponen, porque nosotros nos agarraron trabajando, no nos agarraron robando. Yo desde que empecé a trabajar para esta fábrica hace 7 años. 7 años que en realidad, pues, para mí era una fuente de mi trabajo para poder sacar adelante a mis hijos.
100 ICE agents to detain about 150 people. That is a poor use of our tax money.
Families should not be terrorized. Children should not be terrorized. Our communities should not be terrorized.
Hello, everybody. I came to this country in 1975 as a young child. I came here without documents. We crossed the border, we went over the hills, were caught by ICE once. Finally made it to be reunited with my family, my father and my mother. My sister and I were very happy to see our parents. We came to this country understanding that we were coming and that we were going to have a better opportunity, but that we had to hide from immigration, the la migra, that we understood that we were here and that we needed to hide so that immigration would not catch us. That's the way I grew up. That was what my normal, or my sense of who I was, and there were many other things about who I was, but this was a very important aspect. When I was 7 years old, my mother was working at a garment factory, and my father got a call from the factory owner letting him know that there was an ICE raid, or at that point INS raid, immigration raid. And I remember my father being panicked, and I remember the devastation that I felt when I found out my mother had been picked up. She was picked up at this garment factory, and she was taken back to Tijuana. She made it back, and she made it back along with 7 other people in the back of a trunk. And my mother couldn't walk for many months. Couldn't really, I mean, she was still hurt from what she had to go through. She had to come and run through the hills in heels, because those were the shoes that she was wearing that day. And for me, it was just something that has always been something that was part of me. But my family had a chance. My father figured out, well, what are we going to do in order to make sure that this doesn't happen again, that we're protected. And during that time, if you had somebody in your family, even a young child who was a U.S. citizen, you could actually apply for legalization. It has transformed my life. It has transformed the life of my family. My mother is now a U.S. citizen, and she votes, and she's a progressive voter. So I'm here to tell you today that the reason that I fight for immigration reform, the reason that I fight and the reason that I stand by so many other people who care about this issue is I don't want any other child to go through what I went through, or what those young women and many other young children that I have to meet with every single, I would say certainly every single day. And this is happening today in America. And it's not acceptable. And it can be changed. And it can be changed. And it can be changed so that you can actually have those young women, those young girls grow up with their parents and grow up and have the opportunities, and that those parents can also have opportunities. I'm part of local coalitions and national coalitions fighting for immigration reform. And we fight for immigration reform because we believe that the 12 million people who are living in this country without legal status need a chance to legalize their status now. Right now, we have a system in which if you are in this country for 6 months without documents, if you're in this country a year without documents, and you get a chance to legalize your status, and you happen to have come in with the country without a visa, you have a punishment. For 6 months, you have to wait an additional 3 years. For a year without documents, you have to wait 10 additional years. So there is no wonder that most people don't have legal status, because they cannot access the system. So we're fighting to change a bureaucracy that doesn't allow certain people to come in, and then another part of the bureaucracy that once you get that chance, doesn't let you out. So that right now you have people who have filed petitions from the Philippines, from Mexico, from China, that are waiting average 14 years, 16 years, 21 years to be reunited with their family. Does that make sense to you? It doesn't. People say, well, they should wait in line. And I always say, you know what? They are in line. They've been waiting in line for decades. It's time for them to get out of that line. We fight for... we fight for immigration reform because millions of families are separated, because we see young people who can't reach their full potential, because we feel that there is talent, there is skill, there is a great conviction to succeed, and that we are wasting a lot of lives, and certainly in moving these kind of policies, wasting a lot of money. So we've engaged in this fight. I've been working at Chirla now for 13 years. Many people before me have been in this fight. And we've been able to move the national discourse so that immigration reform is a main point of discussion in this country. And it is and it is an important issue, but it's no more important than education, than healthcare, than many of the other issues. But through much organizing and much work, have been able to move it forward as a priority in the national debate. But we haven't won yet. In fact, we've actually lost. We've had some devastating defeats. And so I'm here to share with you, well, what are some of the lessons that we have learned? And what do we need to understand collectively as we move forward? So what have we learned after moving this debate to be a priority? What have we learned after millions of people were out in the streets, where millions of people around this country feel that they were the initiators, the creators of an incredible movement of people? What have we learned with record numbers of people who have now are becoming citizens, 1.4 million people who have decided that they want to become citizens of the United States and have a voice and be respected? And what have we learned in this devastating defeat that we just suffered in 2000? Well, we learned the following. One, yes, we need to have a sophisticated legislative strategy. It's necessary. But we cannot support a legislative strategy absent a strategic communication strategy, absent the real organizing of people, absent building alliances, and absent countering race and racism in this debate. The legislative strategy. We learned that you can't move a policy proposal that divides your base. We moved a policy proposal that at the end of the day, we were trying to move to create momentum, to create that momentum. And what we realized that in that process, the proposals were getting so weak and so, and really just we're being torn apart, that the very base that was marching out in the streets, the very base of organizations, many of them weren't willing to support them. We learned not to do that. That if we're going to have a policy proposal, we need to be as united as possible. We learned in this last round that we can't ignore communications. And I want to share with you that Lou Dobbs, O'Reilly, Glenn Beck, some of your friends, are people that had 75% of their airtime dedicated to having an anti-immigrant message. When you review what the airtime in 2007 was, 75% of Lou Dobbs' time was spent railing against immigrants. Immigrants as a cause for every single ill in this country. We need to counter that. And we need to invest in a communication strategy that seeks to discredit and to really to show who these people are. And not just to ignore it and to think that everybody else is going to understand that they're crazy, but to understand that in fact they're creating a lot of the information that everyday people are consuming. We learned that in field capacity that we needed to invest in field capacity and we needed to strengthen our field, and that this was one of the places where we needed to invest the most. That we needed to organize in places where we weren't as strong, and in those places where we were strong, we needed to be stronger. You saw in the video with the Micro Solutions workers, part of what happened with these workers was that the plan that ICE had was that all the people who are going to be detained were going to also be deported. That was their business, and that was their business as usual. And we said, no, that's not going to happen. Not here, not in Los Angeles. So out of the 138 people who were detained, 136 are still here with their families. After 3.5 months of fighting, those ankle bracelets that you saw on people's foot are now off. A donor came forward Bob Hildreth came forward, gave us money, and said, if a worker can come up with half their bond, I'll put the other half to remove that, that ankle bracelet. But first they fought in court, and they fought in the streets to make sure that they understood that this was unacceptable. And we are probably still the only city that has done that. These same individuals are ready to fight, and that's what we mean by field organizing and field capacity. If there are millions of people who are in this situation, we cannot have 1,000 or thousands organized. We need to have millions organized. And the work is one person at a time, one situation at a time, but leadership has to emerge from this work. Otherwise, it's not a win. And we need to build alliances with you, with our progressive colleagues. Because in this last round, what we noticed was that progressives on this issue were not convinced, were confused, not connected, and that we realized that at the end of the day, we cannot win without you. We just can't win without you. And that when we were in the trenches fighting on the immigration reform, there were very few voices from the progressive community in support of immigration reform. And we didn't just say, well, it's because our progressive colleagues, they should just know that we're on board. We recognize that we need to do more work to connect us to our side, and that it's a bridge in which we walk to the middle and you walk to the middle, so that you understand how immigration reform helps us all, and that we carry water on all the rest of the issues as well. That we also understand that immigration and immigrants are used as wedge issues, as immigration reform and immigrants as a community to be wedged. We learned that we need to counter racism head on. We need to counter racism head on with our friends and with our foes. With our friends, we had a very broad coalition that included the Irish Reform Lobby, the Legalize the Irish, and they were great and they were wonderful and they were part of our coalition. Some of our friends said, well, you know, it's not that great that the Irish are undocumented. Let's create a bill just for them. Because how can we accept Irish being undocumented? Well, what about the Latinos, and what about the Africans, and what about the Asians, right? To the credit of the Irish Reform Lobby, they stood firm with the coalition. With our foes, the Southern Poverty Law Center has said that there are now about 300 hate groups that have grown out of the fight against immigrants. They are in our cities, they are all over this country, and they are violent, and they are also powerful in this debate. We've seen the increase in hate crimes against our community. Part of our work has now become actually offering support for victims of hate crimes. These are the same people, however, it's not just immigrants that they don't like, they just don't like a lot of people of color or who are different from them. Death threats and revolting mail and emails have become part of our work. So I ask you, shouldn't we be fighting against these groups together and understand that the fight they have with immigrants is the fight they have with anybody, again, who is different from them? We learned that our politicians need to be scared of us. They need to fear us. And that we need to make sure that we're out there voting and that we have a powerful program that actually engages new citizens, that gets them out, educates them, and gets them out to vote. So we formed the We're America Alliance. Holly Holiday's here from the We're America Alliance. And our goal with our 14 national partners is to register 500,000 new citizen voters and to get 1 million people out to the polls in November. In Los Angeles, we've been going to all the naturalization ceremonies where almost 18,000 people are taking the oath to become a citizen. And in May, we were able to register 8,000 of them. We're very happy about that. And just this past week, we were able to register another 7,000. So we're going to make sure that those people are out voting, and they're voting, and they are voting as educated voters. I want to finish with the following. And it's, I came here and I said, I have an ask and a challenge for my colleagues in the progressive community. And the challenge is as follows. I believe that, yes, we have to fight to bring the troops home to stop this war. I ask you, I implore you, that when you think of bringing those young people home, you also think of all the Iraqis, the 500,000 Iraqi refugees who also need to be home. And if we're not going to have them be able to go back to their home, that we open our doors to them as refugees. I ask you that if you're fighting for environmental justice and environmental degradation, that you also think about how this environmental degradation is causing migration so that people can no longer plot their lands, that they have to move into urban areas, and from urban areas migrate north to the United States. To look at the environmental impact. When we're thinking about this, when you're thinking about environmental impact, to also think about the migration impact. In all your work, in all your fights, to look at what the migration impact is and to address it, not to ignore it. I have a second ask, which is, in this fight, there is a historic moment right now. And as we move forward, there's a lot of hope and a lot of possibility. And in this hope and possibility, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to ask you to reject immigrants. To reject immigrants as you push for health care. To reject immigrants as you fight for the right to organize and for labor rights. To reject immigrants when we're talking about the economic stimulus. They've already done it. The economic stimulus says very clearly that if even if you worked, and even if you paid taxes, you cannot get any refund back. So right now, we have military families, and it's just for military families, who are fighting so that even if there's somebody in the home who's undocumented, if there is somebody who is fighting in the military, that they could get some of those resources back. So I ask you that as we move forward in this time of opportunity, which we have all created, to make sure that you don't reject immigrants and you don't reject any other community. Because there's great benefit to all of us. Because I can tell you, and I have seen it, that immigrants will fight for health care, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who don't have it. They will fight for labor rights and the right to organize, because they're the ones being exploited. They're going to fight for racial justice because they are being pushed, and they've seen how other communities have also been discriminated. They will fight against criminalization because they're workers but treated as criminals. And that together we can build America, together we have a lot of strength, is not just a feel-good rhetoric of the time, but in this historic time, it is strategic, it is necessary, and it is the powerful action that we need. So I really thank you for giving us the time to talk about immigration.